Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Strength Coach Roundtable on the Row Perfect Rowing Chat YouTube channel. I am Will Ruth, and I'm joined here by my two fellow rowing strength coaches to talk about recovering from both rowing training as well as strength training. So we're going to start. It's been a little while since we've done an episode, so let's go ahead and start by introducing yourself again, just real briefly, but also bring us up to speed on what you've been doing in the fall season, as we've all got teams and clients and all sorts of stuff going on. Blake, why don't you start us?
Sure. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here again. I'm Blake Gourlay. I'm the performance director for Las Vegas Rowing Club, and now former strength coach for the Santa Clara University men's team. And then I also have my own training business out here in California. And I have a website that I run, which is called rowingstrength.com. Lately, I've just been running summer camps and training clients privately up at the Las Vegas Rowing Club.
Hi, everyone. My name is Joe DeLeo. I'm located in Providence, Rhode Island. My website's leotraining.io. I write content around strength and conditioning and injury rehabilitation for rowing. And since our last strength coach roundtable, I've done some coaching over the summer for the Naval Academy high school rowing camps, as well as did a presentation for the U.S. Women's Junior National Team on low back injuries and rehabilitation. And then also did a private workshop with the U.S. Naval Academy lightweight men's rowing team, and currently coaching the Lincoln School girls tennis team.
Right on. So like I said, I'm Will Ruth, and run the website strengthcoachwill.com, although it has been some time since I have written an article. I've been extremely busy for the last couple months. Started a master's program through the University of Denver in sport coaching, which has been awesome, but certainly a graduate level amount of reading and discussion boards and Skype conferences and everything. I thought, okay, online program, how engaging and everything is it going to be, and it's been way more useful than I thought it was going to be, and I still expected it to be highly useful. So that's been a lot of fun. And then our novice coach at Western Washington decided to go travel Europe all fall, which I can't really blame him for, but that does put me filling in as a novice coach. So I've been out every morning with the team, which has been a lot of fun, but added another thing in there. And then I coach lacrosse on Sundays too. So been a lot of coaching. The writing will eventually come back. I'm looking at getting the website redesigned and stuff too. So that'll be kind of the next phase. Now, Joe, you've been podcasting up a storm too. So I want to hear a little bit about that. Joe does podcasts, like once a week, right?
Yeah, I try to publish a weekly episode since I launched it at the beginning of March this past spring. So I've had some really good guests on. During the Olympics, I tried to basically building up and through it, just have a rowing centered guest, whether it was an athlete, a strength coach, or a clinician. So I had Bob Kaler on, who was a three-time U.S. rowing Olympian. He's also a physical therapist and inventor of the Body Bandit. I had Dr. Jane Thornton on, who, Will, you know very well. We were discussing kind of the latest research and evidence around rib injuries in the sport of rowing. And she had also just finished up doing a paper that she had published with Dr. Anders Vinther and Dr. Fiona Wilson that kind of covers all the injuries that are proclivative to the sport of rowing. And then, from there, just trying to bring out some content and kind of look at it from some different angles. And, like you guys, just trying to continue to educate the rowing community and hopefully have us be a little bit healthier.
Yeah. Well, I think podcasts are great too, because as coaches, we all spend a lot of time driving around, especially as rowing, since it seems like everybody has a minimum, 20-minute drive or something to the boathouse. So I think that's an awesome way to learn more about the sport. So definitely head over and check out Joe's podcast. But so here we are on our podcast. And so, like I said, today we're going to talk recovery, and that's really recovering both from session to session as well as from training block to training block and season to season. So we'll look at it from a couple different ways, and for strength training as well as for rowing training. So yeah, why don't we each start? Mention one kind of common and controllable factor affecting recovery. So something that most rowers can control and can do better. Blake, you want to start?
Sure. I'll just take the easy one from you guys. Sorry. We'll go with sleep. Sleep, something that everyone can control and something that everyone can always get more of. And most of the time when I gave a presentation to the parents of the Las Vegas Rowing Club earlier this month. And when I say it, they usually giggle because they're like, how are they going to get more sleep? Like, they're rowing 6 days a week. They're going to school and taking all these advanced classes. Like, they don't have time for sleep. I mean, once you understand the importance of sleep, and understand that it doesn't need to be like 8 to 10 hours of straight sleep, and you can actually incorporate naps, I think people see the value in it, and they make it, they take the opportunity to get more. But what I like to tell my athletes is, you've heard of testosterone, you've heard of human growth hormone, and you naturally produce those in your sleep. And most of the time, if you get an extra half hour, if you get an extra hour, you're going to produce more of that, and you're basically taking steroids legally. And I think that's a really good way to sell it to athletes and clients. But yeah, the goal for most people should be between 8 to 10 hours a night, especially for high school and college athletes. But that includes naps, so it doesn't have to be straight. And just a couple of cool facts on sleep. There's a study that said that if you sleep less than 5 hours a night, you're 4.5 times more likely to catch a cold compared to people that sleep 7 hours a night. And, getting sick while training is a huge detriment to your training. So keeping yourself healthy there is important. And then if you sleep less than 8 hours a night, compared to people that sleep more than 8 hours a night or 8 hours, you're 1.7 times more likely to get injured. So that's really where I see the value, is keeping them healthy.
The sickness is definitely just an unbelievable factor so far. I mean, I'd always been aware of it, but now with being with them every day, just the awareness of how many of them are sick at any one given time, and then how quickly that spreads to everybody else. And rowers, they're tough. They like hard work. They don't like to back down from anything. But really, it just kind of becomes selfish when you're showing up sick, not only because you're going to make yourself worse, but just with getting everybody else sick too. It's just hard to avoid in the sport. Thanks for all that. So we'll come back around. So after each of us say kind of what our factors, we'll come back around for more discussions on each of those. So Joe, why don't you go next?
Sure. So the one that I kind of think of is stress. And the one that we usually relate the most to is physical, right? So we kind of think of the training load and what we're doing from workout to workout or over the course of a week. But there's two other components to it. So you have the mental side of stress as well as the chemical or hormonal side. And so all three of those kind of combine and make up what affects you, over the course of a day or a week or the year. So we're not going to completely eliminate how much stress that we're under, but we can do a lot of things to mitigate or reduce them. So that is something that I would focus on, because most of the athletes that we're talking about are either going to be high school or college. So they're balancing, full course load with a training program on top of, especially if they're seniors, they're applying to colleges, or if they're in the collegiate environment, they've got a heavy course load. So really planning to get ahead and trying to mitigate any undue stress can go a long way in making sure that you're recovering adequately.
I think let's give a shout out to our masters too there, because it's certainly not just high school and college kids who have stress in their lives. Our new head coach at Western now turns 70 this year, and still he's going to be racing ahead of the Charles next weekend, and he's certainly got a full-time load. But with his coaching every morning, trying to fit in training, doing his own stuff, and still works remotely in a rowing fundraising operation. So definitely stressed to manage at that level as well.
God bless him, man. That is a full load right there. He's doing a ton.
Seriously, and I mean he's faster than half the guys on our team too. So that's always funny. We were one short on a relay, on an erg relay, so he just jumped right in and cold and did this whole relay race with them. So yeah, cool to see.
Old man strength. Old man strength.
Seriously. All right, so Blake took sleep, Joe took stress. I'll take water. That's another real basic one that everybody can control. But just a couple tips there. I'm sorry, I'm American. I don't know the conversion here. Maybe one of you guys could punch it up while I'm talking. But my like baseline water consumption for athletes is half your body weight in ounces. So I weigh 180 pounds. Half of that is 90. So I'm going to try to drink 90 ounces of water a day. Easiest thing to do is just find a water bottle that you can track. So if I had three 30-ounce water bottles, or if I had a 30-ounce water bottle, then I know I got to drink 3 of those through the day, and then you just pace yourself through that. That's certainly one of those things that everybody can do, but that few people actually make like part of their lifestyle to do on a daily basis. They'll think, oh, okay, I should drink more water, and they'll drink more for like a day, and then forget about it the next day. One of the gals I work with was kind of having the same problem, and she actually found an app that is a plant, and you have to drink water in order to water your plant. So if you need some help, like everything else, there's an app for that.
That, of course, there's an app for that. There's an app for everything.
Yep. So Blake, one of the things I jotted down just on sleep is like, do you have any tips for, let's say, I mean, obviously a lot of that picture is time management, but also relaxation and feeling like you could wind down. A lot of people get in bed and just toss and turn. What are your kind of go-to tips for increasing your amount of sleep, either through the day or per night?
Yeah, it's usually, I think the biggest thing is that, like you said, people need to wind down. So they'll go straight from looking at their cell phone or straight from watching TV into trying to sleep. And your body's just not ready for it because of all that UV light and all that stimulation. So just having some sort of bedtime routine. So, I mean, most of the time, just getting off your phone, a half an hour to an hour, turning off all the electronics a half an hour to an hour before you go to bed, and then taking a hot shower. Most of the time, that's enough for people. I think people that struggle with sleep can use different forms of breathing, different forms of stretching, and maybe some people would go to the extreme of meditation. But yeah, it's really just about dialing down and getting ready to relax.
I think one of the big things is having a ritual, and also like coming up with your own thing that works for you. Like for me, a hot shower means like I'm waking up. So that totally doesn't work for me for bedtime. But I mean, I still keep up with my training, and this is the first year that I haven't competed in strongman, but I usually try to do that. And I've had to be really regimented about my own bedtime just with getting up early to coach. Like if I'm doing all that stuff as a coach, then my athletes certainly should as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And a couple other things that you can do, either from a ritual standpoint or just for sleep. Really make sure that the room's pretty dark. So if you need to like add drapes, that's a big thing for me. I'm pretty light sensitive, so shades don't cut it. I need to have drapes in the room. The other thing is like Blake had mentioned, making sure you're really winding down towards the end of the night. So I do like a hot shower. The other thing too is the temperature in the room. So turning down, you want to be a little bit cooler. If it's too hot, you're not going to sleep well throughout the night. So the quality isn't going to be very good. So those are a couple other things that you can think about or may change in your sleeping habits.
A couple I thought of too, just while you were talking, was on the subject of apps. There's one that I quite like, which is F.Lux, and it's an app that dims the screen based on the time of day. So it syncs up with your time zone and records or tracks or syncs up with like the sunset and the sunrise. So it gets more like yellowy and dark after sunset, which cuts down on some of that blue light that can really interrupt how your body starts producing melatonin to get you ready to sleep. And then the other thing too is keeping with the ritual, like sticking to a set bedtime. That the more often that you do that, and the more that you get in that routine, the easier it's going to be to stay in that routine. I find that like if on the weekends I stay up until, oh, I don't know, 10:30 or something, really crazy, then it's just harder for me to get back in the rhythm once Monday comes around, and the early morning boathouse feels a lot earlier.
We're going to refer to you as Will the party animal from now on.
That has been my nickname for a long time, so that would work well. Yeah. All right. Let's see, Blake, anything else to add on, or Joe, anything else to add on the stress topic?
I guess the only other thing I would say for stress is you want to try to, like I said, mitigate. So other kind of practices that you can do is try to do a better job of planning if you're not very organized. So try to get ahead if you know that you're going to have schoolwork or tests coming up. Plan if you have items due at work. Try to get those done ahead of time, even if that means doing some work outside of your job. Anything you can do to kind of, cut it off ahead of time and make sure that you're not letting it pile up. And then, that's about it right now off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know like a lot of people might listen to this and think, oh, they're, a bunch of young guys without families or whatever talking about stress. What do they know? But we are all certainly jamming in terms of the professional picture with multiple jobs and school and teams. And I mean, I know on some days I'm literally running from one thing to one thing. And one of the things that has really helped me is meal prep ahead of time. So I'll try to make like one big meal, and that actually fits into another recovery factor, which is calories. So this way I can make sure that I've always got like enough food on hand, and it cuts out a ton of time too. I mean, if you think of all the time that you spend cooking every single meal every day, if you individually prep each meal versus if you fire up the slow cookers or the oven or something like that, for once a week, you've got like one meal taken totally care of. I know that was big for me, both as an athlete and still now as a coach.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because you're taking care of it ahead of time. But the other thing is you're probably also really making sure that you have quality food. And when you're pinched on time, you're going to go to what's quick, convenient, and available, which is usually some sort of convenience store or fast food item, which if you're an athlete is pretty terrible, especially if you're performing and burning a ton of calories in the classroom and then on the on the water.
Yep. Or just skipping meals too. I mean, I'll talk to a lot of my guys. They'll be like, oh, well, I got up late for practice, so I had to rush straight to the boathouse, so I didn't get to eat breakfast beforehand, or, afterwards I had to rush straight to class, so I didn't get food in between. It's like, okay, now you've gone, 4 hours after exercise without actually consuming any calories. Like that's definitely going to cut into your recovery too.
Yeah. And a big thing for me when I think about managing stress is building in different forms of recovery throughout your day and throughout your week. And what I mean by that is, sometimes maybe you just have like a minute. Sometimes maybe it's 5, or like you have an hour, or whatever it is. Find time in the day for yourself to kind of just unwind for a minute. Lay down, work on your breathing for a minute. That helps me a lot. Sometimes if I have 5 minutes between training sessions, this sounds funny, I'll jump in the pool really quick, wash off, and then go back. And that just kind of like wakes me up and keeps me going. And everybody has a different strategy that works for them. But if you're just stressed and running 100% of the time all day, like it's going to catch up to you.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, I think that that's what we want people to be able to get out of this podcast is not necessarily one prescribed ritual that's going to work for everybody, but a bunch of ideas that you can take and see how you could fit them into your life. But realize that, like you said, there's going to be some sort of active, like it's not just about finding time, it's about making time. So if you need to recover better between sessions, with which most athletes do, where can you make that time? I had one athlete say that a previous coach of his made them write down what they did every day by half hour increments, and then went back and looked through the log. It was like, all right, here's where you're wasting time. Here's where you're wasting time. To emphasize to them like how much better their time management could be for how much more recovery and much more athletic performance they wanted.
Nice. That log's a good idea. I might use that. I actually spent like a year where I was just like pretty unhealthy and didn't take care of myself because I was just busy. And like you said, like I'm actually scheduling time for myself now. Like instead of taking clients at a certain hour, I'll just block that hour out so that I can train every day. And it's had a huge impact on my well-being and how often and how long I can go in terms of training. Because I mean, I don't have a day off. I don't think you guys do either.
Nope. Yeah, and I think if you asked, 9 out of 10 people would say, yes, I'm a busy person. So it's like everybody's going to find things to fill up their day with. So everybody should then be diligent about finding things to kind of unprogram and minimize those throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one that is very easy to do is just some diaphragmatic breathing. Whether you got 5 minutes, you can just lay on your back, put your feet up against the wall into a 90-90 position, and just do some deep diaphragmatic breathing. Really calms the nervous system down. That's something that I do pretty often. It just helps to, again, reset the mood, calm the stress levels down, nervous system. It's also a good way to end any of the training sessions, whether on the water in the strength and conditioning room.
Yep, nice. All right, well, unless either of you guys have anything to add to that, we can go ahead and move on to our next question. Going once, going twice. All right. So we kind of talked about, all of this is going to be what is a recovery protocol and how can you create one, but let's talk a little bit about like what a recovery protocol means. Either of you want to just take a stab at like defining that at a basic level?
I guess it would just be the strategy specific to you to get you to recover as quickly as possible between training sessions.
So how long do you think you should give, one thing a shot before saying it does or doesn't work for you, and how should you track that?
That's a good question. I feel like most of the time you notice pretty quickly. Like if I find something that personally works for me, I notice right away, and I'll definitely notice the next day. I wouldn't give up on it immediately, but some people, some recovery strategies are stressful for some people, and some are actually relieve stress for others. So it is important that you find your own.
Blake, I know you and I talked a little bit off or emailed a little bit about using like heart rate monitors. Is that something that you use with the heart rate variability or recording any of those metrics like resting pulse or the tap test or anything like that in the morning to monitor day-to-day recovery?
Yeah, a few things I played around with have been grip strength. So I measured grip strength every day for every season or for every practice last year, and I just kind of tracked the variation there. And
was it on like a hand dynamometer?
Yeah, exactly. And what I found was basically you could tell when someone was going to get sick, which is interesting. So their grip strength would like drop off like 10, 15, 20 pounds from the day before. And then they would usually be sick the next day, or I would check in with them. So they'd come in, they'd like do the attendance to let me know they're there. They'd squeeze the dynamometer, and then I would check in with them personally. And most of the time, like how they felt that day correlated to how low their grip strength was.
Interesting. That's like witch doctor status pretty much, with being able to predict that.
Yeah, the thing is figuring out how to use it. Because I don't think I prevented anyone from getting sick, but I would dial back training for certain people depending on how big the drop was.
Well, if you do find a cure for the common cold, make sure to let us know, and don't forget us when you're rich and famous.
Working on it. yeah, and then I've been playing around with heart rate a lot this summer and into this season, as well as HRV. And the cool thing with heart rate is you can see changes in resting heart rate. You can see changes in their HRV, and you can see that day to day. I mean, the biggest thing you see is what recovery strategy works for the individual. So I have a client that recovers really well when she's social, which is kind of funny. Like, no one thinks about social recovery. But if she goes out and like has a really good day with her family, or she goes out and has a really good day with her friends, the next day her HRV skyrocketed. She feels great. She's ready to take on the world. And that really stood out to me as something interesting that most people don't think about.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, that kind of gets to, like, it's really easy to ignore the human side of athletes and want to think that they're just, inputs and outputs and there's your performance. But that definitely speaks to like the fact that we're all social. And I know that with any of us as coaches, when we get crazy overtaxed and just coaching all the time, like, we've got to have a break too. Otherwise that starts to affect our performance. So why wouldn't it be the same the other way?
Yeah, and I had a PCA. They came out, the Positive Coaching Alliance, and gave us a little seminar the other day, and they were talking about like filling people's buckets, and positive and negative, and with a lot of negative comments you empty their bucket, with a lot of positive comments you fill the bucket.
Sure.
And what made me think of was like having a good positive team environment, or having a team environment that you want to go to, and that, to lack of a better word, fills your bucket, actually addresses the social recovery part for your athletes. So if you're providing a good environment, you're actually going to fill their social recovery bucket, and they're going to be less likely to get injured, get sick, and more likely to recover for the next session.
It's also too, like, that gets back to Joe's point about stress, that's just then training is not only physical stress, but it's also mental or emotional stress. If 6 feet rams his ore into your kidneys every morning, and you just start to hate practice and you hate your coach and all this, then that's just going to become one big stressor to manage as well.
Absolutely. I mean, most people are going to leave something that doesn't make them feel good.
Cool. So yeah, I would say as far as developing a recovery protocol, like, definitely writing down what you do. That's something you can use a logbook for, like a training logbook as well, is to write down. One of the things I've done before is I've had my athletes write down their body weight at the start of the day, or at the start of the training session, whatever it is, and how many hours of sleep they got the night before, and then their readiness to train. And that's just a subjective scale of 1 to 10. They can write down, an 8 means like, okay, like pretty ready. 10 means like they're charged up, ready to go. You start getting down into the 2s and 3s, and you know that they're probably getting overstressed and anxious about stuff. And you can kind of track that over time, and then also write down, like, in the margin, okay, I took a hot bath last night. I did whatever. I got this amount of sleep. I did this meditation protocol, that kind of thing. And then you can kind of track that alongside with your training, since I know a lot of athletes already keep training logs.
Yeah, the training log is a great tool. The biggest thing with that is just being consistent and steady with it, and taking the time, probably every couple of weeks, once a month, to look back and review the notes and see if you see or identify any trends in there. And then the other thing is, I would say, in terms of actual components of the recovery protocol, is don't be afraid to play around with it a little bit and experiment. Everybody's different, so you want to find out kind of what things work for you, what you react well to and what you don't react well to, and that can definitely vary, depending on the intensity of the training session or the duration, or if you're doing on the strength training side, if you're focusing on certain compound lifts or specific muscle groups, that area of your body may be more sore. So you might want to give that more attention at the end of the session and do some specific foam rolling or stretching around that area, or mobility work.
Yeah, that's one of the things you can add to the training log too, is a soreness factor on a scale of 1 to 10. And same thing, just trying to monitor that over time. And if you start to see a few days in the eights, nines, and tens, then making sure to back off a little bit or add a little more recovery.
And I think this is relevant to any masters rowers that are listening. But as I get older, I realize that I obviously can't train the way I used to train, and I had a back injury, so there's a lot of adjustments that I have to make. But I call it the old man training plan. So I used to have a plan, and I'd follow it, every single day exactly to the T, no matter what. And now I just listen to my body. So like as an adult, sometimes you need to listen to your body. Actually, most of the time you do. And you need to figure out like what your body's willing to give you that day. And I'm not saying like take it easy every single day, but there's days you're going to feel really good and you're going to have a PR that day. You're going to train extremely hard. You're going to make huge progress. And then there's going to be a day where you just run down and you need to take care of yourself, have a recovery day, or maybe take the day completely off. And I've seen like huge progress in my fitness just following that for the last like 3 months. Just approaching each day as a different day and just feeling how my body feels that day and doing what I can that day.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, I'm 24, so I'm still kind of coasting on that made of magic and rubber phase. But I've also been kind of tracking my own. I found that about 80% of my training days are kind of within that like 8 out of 10 range, or 80% of my days are fine, and 10% of my training sessions are really good, and then 10% of my training sessions are I'm just dragging through it. So just that'll help you keep a longer vision on your training picture too, recognizing that like 80% of those days just show up, get the meters in, get the reps in, that kind of thing, and then don't get too high on the highs and don't get too low on the lows.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. The older I get, the more I am not afraid to call an audible for the day and adjust my training plan based on how I'm feeling. I definitely listen to my body way more than when I was in college or post-college, just because I'm a little bit more educated and my body does not bounce back the way it used to. So to Blake's point, you have to really tune in and listen because if you're stubborn about it, and you can put yourself in the hole pretty quickly, and either start training poorly, or you can get sick, from that type of thing if you don't take the time to back off.
I know that Larry Gluckman too, who's a man with a lot more experience and meters on him than probably the three of us combined. He said the same thing when he did his rowing chat right on this channel, was that after a certain point, your goal is just to match what you did before. So he would keep a training log of like annual meters and everything, and would just try to match it from year to year to year. You're still going to get better for sure.
The other thing that I think is really interesting to that point is I remember an interview with, I think it was Amish Bond and Murray leading up to Rio, and those guys were like very candid. They're just like, at this point in our careers, like we really don't get like that much better. Like, yeah, like we still test 2K, but I'm within like a second or a half a second. I'm really not like hitting a PR like anymore, because they're kind of maintaining and getting better in terms of experience and racing experience, and that years and years of training under their belt. But in terms of like their peak ability, like, yeah, they're really not going to get that much better, and they kind of acknowledge that. And they've also changed up their training. After Drysdale won in 2012, a huge portion of his training program was on the bike, because he could not spend the time on the rowing machine or in the single. So he was only doing like one session in the boat a day, and the rest of the time he was doing anywhere from 2, 3, 4 hours on the bike to get his aerobic component in there.
I think it's a good point too, that there's an old saying that a change is as good as a rest. So if you're having trouble recovering out of one system of training, whether that's, really polarized with a lot of high intensity stuff, or a lot of, long-term steady state meter stuff, or if you're in the gym and you've been doing just a ton of 12 to 15 reps or a ton of intensity stuff in the 3 to 5 rep range, then just changing it up for a block at a time can just change that stimulus for your body, help you recover better, and then help you adapt better to then when you can come back to a different style of training. Or maybe you find that that other style of training works better for you. I mean, there's this cumulative effect of adding up all these little things that we're talking about with drinking more water, getting more sleep, minimizing your stress. There's like the session to session effect that'll help, but then add up all of those little, marginal gains over seasons and years. You're talking about a pretty big influence on training overall.
No, totally. And you kind of just jogged my memory, but traditionally, like historically, this isn't even really done anymore, but there used to be really 3 components to a training system. You had your martial component, where that would actually involve like fighting. And then you'd have a pedagogical or competitive or competition. And then you'd actually have a restorative component. And that comes out of, the Greeks and the Romans and actual standardized training systems like George Hebert's natural method. And you look at that, and we really don't do that anymore. Like, we don't actually program in sessions for recovery. A big tool that I use is Indian club swinging. It's something that is getting your shoulder girdle and your wrists and your elbows to move in all kinds of different patterns with a very, very lightweight 1 pound club. And you're doing all these different movements, but it's actually extremely neural. So the first time that people try them, they don't understand and are really quite often surprised at how fatigued they get, because they're just moving something that's extremely light, but it's so central nervous system driven that they're just completely wiped out. But it also forces you to maintain really good posture and breath work. So it's a very restorative component, and it also helps counteract a lot of the effects of spending that time into that kyphotic posture that they're getting from the rowing stroke, as well as in a job or the classroom.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we've been talking about so far has been kind of passive recovery techniques, stuff that you could do kind of throughout your day. Let's go ahead and shift gears into stuff like what you were just talking about with what active recovery techniques you use, whether that's, low intensity work on the bike, or whether that's ice baths, or whether that's something else. Blake, you want to start us there?
Sure. I mean, my first go-to would be using active recovery. So whether, you're training intervals, in between where we're actively recovering, just because you're going to clear the waste products more quickly and you're going to be able to go harder on the next interval.
So that's within workout. That's like from piece to piece.
Yeah, that's just from piece to piece. And then also the way that I organize training is I use a high-low system. So, I do a hard day, which would be a high day, and then I do a low day, which is easy recovery day. And I just alternate back and forth. And
both weight room and rowing?
Weight room, a little bit less fluctuation, but yeah, rowing specifically.
Okay.
And then what I find is if I use the high-low model and I give them, it's not a day off, it's just more of a technical day, lighter day, they're more willing, and they're also more able to go hard on the hard days. So those would be my big go-tos.
And for that low day, I mean, you said like it's not a day off, but you're also not just going out for a paddle around, right? Like what sort of technical stuff are you focusing on for that low day?
I mean, I would go through normal technical progressions, whatever we're focusing on that day. And then we would still do conditioning. It would just be aerobic focused, and making sure that they stay, 80% and under for their heart rate. But you can also, play around within that range. It doesn't just need to be steady state. Like you can do, one of the things we play around with are tempo intervals. And we do that with hills. We do that on the erg. We do it on the water. And they're just going like 70% effort for 10 seconds. And then they paddle, bring the heart rate down, and then they go 10 seconds, 70% and bring it up.
So your rest interval is just as long as it takes your heart rate to get down?
Yeah, and you can kind of manipulate that depending on what your goal is. But early on in the season, I usually have them recover to like 65% of their heart rate max. And then later in the season, when I'm working on capacity, I want them to be able to go longer and manage more fatigue. I'll have them recover to 75%.
So they're wearing some sort of wearable heart rate monitor for this, right?
Yeah, and it depends on the session. So we found that some circuits, like we strap them up and we see what kind of intensity they're going at, and it's very consistent, and we know that we don't have to put the heart rate monitors on. And other sessions we track it.
Cool. Just since you mentioned steady state, that's one of the things that will drive you crazy as a coach. I'm sure you guys can relate. Is when you give an athlete something like recovery or active cardio or something like that to do, and then you check in with them later and go, well, yeah, it didn't seem very hard, so I sprinted out the last 1K or something like that. And there's like, okay, you've now taken my active recovery training and turned it into a stressor.
Yeah, way to throw that in the mud. I appreciate it.
Yeah, right. Like, cool. Now we have to program active recovery for your active recovery because you didn't do recovery on your active recovery.
No, totally. I mean, I'm guilty as charged as an athlete. I've done that before. And part of that is just being younger and immature and undisciplined and not knowing. And you feel like you're not working, like when it's that easy at that intensity level. So, well, shoot, if I'm not working, what value am I going to get out of this? So that I think that's, kind of part of it is understanding how it actually works and what the benefits are. And I know that's something you wanted to make sure we touched on, Will. So I'll let you kind of explain why that's important and actually the sort of the changes that take place on a biological and cellular level.
Yeah, just before we get and deep into the physiology or anything, I mean, that's one of the things that I've tried to be better about as a coach is being a little bit more transparent with why my athletes are doing certain things. So when we assign them something, explaining to them like, here's the marginal gains of recovery, and here's what happens if you do get this amount of sleep a night, if you do drink this amount of water a day, if you don't sprint out the last 1K of your active recovery cardio. Like, let's look at like the big picture instead of just like the day-to-day picture, to think, one season or 4 years, one collegiate career, one Olympic cycle or something like that down the road, to look at how all those add up.
One thing I want to touch on real quick, the fact that athletes like try to sprint the last 1,000 of active recovery or whatever it is, that's also what I want to see that energy from them. Like, that's what I'm trying to get. I'm trying to get them ready for the hard day. So when I see that, it actually excites me. I just stop it right away. And you made a good point. Like, you have to educate them if you want them to understand and really buy into it.
Well, it's good too to see like the positive side. So it's not just 3 crotchety coaches talking about things that kids do these days, but actually seeing like the positive side of it as well.
No, for sure. And every training session, there's a purpose, there's a focus, and so you have to kind of stay within not necessarily boundaries, but stay within the protocol for that training session. So if it's recovery or aerobic work, stick to that, because what people don't, often think about or realize is that when you start saying, oh, well, I'm going to do my own thing, or I'm going to add in some hard strokes because I don't really feel like working, and then the next day you actually have the training session that's programmed as a very hard day, you're already taking away from that. You know what I mean? So it doesn't behoove you to do something like that the day before.
I think that's a good point. One of the things we were talking about is like recognizing the importance of recovery. There's this place in Denver that I've just found out about called Denver Sports Recovery. Their motto is perform, recover, rebuild. They have like 25 people working on their staff, and all they do is recovery, and they have like, so it's not training, it's not any of this, it's just they are the recovery specialists. So it's physical therapy. I'm just looking at their website right now with like what services they offer. So it's incredible to see like an entire facility with a bunch of people working there that's just elite athletes recognizing the value of recovery, and then buying into it and doing it. I'm sure it's not cheap, but yeah, pretty interesting just to see that kind of resource becoming a thing out there.
And I think a lot of times people just don't realize how much they can impact their recovery, and they don't really know that they have options. And just knowing that, if I do this, and once you find your recovery, that strategy that works for you, if I do this, I perform better, I feel better. Once you take control and ownership, it helps you progress quite a bit faster. And I think with younger athletes, it sounds like we all work with younger athletes. Like they have no idea. Like I knew nothing about recovery strategies. I thought I just, stopped working out. I thought that was my recovery strategy.
Well, I think even looking at masters athletes too, like there's a lot of room for improvement with the tools that people have at their disposal, like the everyday stuff that everybody could be doing. And I think that's actually where I'd rather go with our last few minutes on this. Is like, sure, if you've got the money and something like Denver Sports Recovery like around the corner from you, then maybe that is realistic to be a part of your training. But a lot of us don't, and a lot of us can do great recovery stuff, on our own from home. Joe, did you want to add something for that?
No, that's great. I was just going to give them a couple actionable items that they could do.
Yeah, do it.
So a big one that I do with any students or clients that are lifting is implementing fast and loose drills, which is something they teach within Strong First. So it's simply, say you're doing some sort of grind, like a deadlift, or a Turkish get up, or a ballistic. Afterwards, you want to think about, okay, now I've just learned how to contract and tense my muscles purposefully. Now I want to do the opposite. I want to learn how to really relax. So visualize that somebody just sprayed you with a hose, and you're going to try to shake that water off of your arm or off of your leg. And you're trying to get the muscle to relax so much that it just, it's like wringing water out of a towel. And getting athletes to kind of have that awareness, okay, yeah, I can go really hard and I can learn how to tense up my muscles, but equally important is learning how to relax. That's super important. It's two sides of the performance coin: tension and relaxation. There's
a sports psych technique there too called the progressive muscle relaxation, where it basically walks you through a guided tour of trying to relax each muscle under conscious control. It's amazing how much just constant tension you're carrying in all of your muscles until you really focus on contracting and then just getting to that relaxation point like you're talking about. And that's something you can do. There are scripts for it on YouTube that will walk you through progressive muscle relaxation, and that's definitely a restorative thing that can be added into a bedtime ritual, or it could be done in between sets or whatever.
And I think if you look at all forms of recovery strategies, all they're doing is trying to get your nervous system to relax. So you're hyped up, you're really stressed out. All these strategies do is try to get you to relax. So that drill obviously fits that. Like Joe mentioned earlier, breathing is going to get a lot of people to relax, and really working on and learning how to breathe correctly. The hot shower sounds like it didn't work for Will, but hot shower tends to promote relaxation of the nervous system. Foam rolling tends to promote relaxation. Really, really cheap. Oh, it doesn't need to be cheap. You can get a nice massage, but most people can't. Most people can't afford a nice massage, but you can go and get those $15, $20 massages, and maybe it's not a fantastic massage, but there's a healing effect of human contact, and there's also just the stress release of just spending an hour taking care of yourself.
Yeah, the hot shower didn't work for me, but the hot Epsom salt bath definitely did. That's something else that if you play, or if you play or do a hard sport like rowing is, and you're wearing a lot of layers, or you're out there in the warm weather, like Blake down in California, you're gonna be sweating a lot, and magnesium is a water soluble mineral, and you sweat that right out. So if you do something like an Epsom salt bath or supplementation of zinc and magnesium in particular, that can really help recovery as well. And then it's also relaxing, and it's self-care, and it's recovery, and it's easy to see how all of these kind of start to come together, and then you realize how powerful just sticking to each one of those is going to be. Hey, do either of you guys use like contrast baths or cold water immersion or ice baths in this?
Yeah, I've used contrast showers. I haven't done like a full ice bath in a long time, but I've done contrast showers. That was actually something that Dr. McGill recommended when I had him on for a podcast. And
Tell us what that means or how you'd use them.
Sure. So if you're taking a shower, you can kind of turn up the heat, the temperature of the water, and then get it really, really cold, and you move back and forth, and that kind of helps to get the muscles relaxed and move any flush any toxins out of the body, and help promote recovery. So another way to do it is just, if you have the ability, moving from sauna or spa or jacuzzi into like cold water and going back and forth.
One thing I think, like with the cold water immersion stuff, you're not going to really get it that cold if it's just coming out of a tap, but people generally do like ice baths way too cold. Where like, sure, you can get more Instagram likes or whatever if it looks super hardcore and you've got chunks of actual glaciers floating in it. But that I think gets to the point where it's actually more traumatic, and then you have to recover further from it because it's so harsh on the body. So something like the contrast bath or the contrast shower, like you're talking about, where you're going from hot to like kind of cold, but still obviously well above freezing, is going to be more restorative and less acutely traumatic.
Yeah, in terms of like water therapy, what I use is when we travel to regattas and we're staying at a hotel with a pool, I'll use pool recovery. And a lot of it's, to be honest, a lot of it's mental. A lot of it's just allowing the kids to relax and be together and kind of play around in the pool. But we go through like dynamic stretches, do a little light swimming, and then we'll end with a little contrast therapy. So we'll have them go in the pool, back to the hot tub, to the pool, back to the hot tub. And we'll always end in the hot tub because I want them to be relaxed. And most of the time heat will stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system, which will get you to relax. So those are my go-tos. I do use ice baths, but I think a lot of it's mental. I'm not sure how much it actually helps with inflammation, but I do know that it definitely stimulates the nervous system and it makes you kind of like excited and ready to go again. So I think the time that you use that's important. So I only use ice baths between, like if they have 2 races in a day, I'll use it between races. I won't use it if it was like they're about ready to go to bed. Like I'm not going to use it before bedtime because it's actually gonna it's actually gonna keep them up.
No, that's a great point, Blake. I mean, it definitely charges you up. So making sure it's used at the appropriate time of day is pretty important.
Cool. I mean, that was a jam-packed hour of a lot of recovery stuff that hopefully our listeners will be able to kind of take and figure out what they're going to put in their training immediately. Do you guys have anything you want to add before we sign off here?
The only thing is just let us know what you think and try implementing some of these strategies, and we'd love to hear your feedback.
Yeah, just say play around with it, find out what works for you. If you have questions, we're here to help, and we're more than happy to get back to emails.
Definitely, for sure. All right, guys. Well, thanks for putting the time for this, and for our audience, we hope that this was useful. And yeah, like Joe said, let us know. You can drop us a comment on the YouTube here, or you can hit up Row Perfect on social media, and either the three of us will be able to see that, or you can find us through our website or social media contact info, which we'll put down here in the comments of the YouTube and on iTunes. So thanks, guys, and thank you everyone for listening.